In this video, we will look at the historical underpinnings and the evolution of Constitution of India. So this topic comes under GS paper 2 in polity governance in polity, and as we all know, GS paper 2 carries 250 marks. So it is one of the most important topics of GS paper 2. It is important from the point of perspective of prelims also. So now let's move forward and begin the video. So first we look at the underpinnings and then the evolution, historical underpinnings and then the evolution. So as we all know, the East India Company, which came to India in 1600, managed to capture substantial administrative power after the Battle of Buxar in 1765. And British got revenue and civil justice rights for Bengal, Bihar and Odisha after the Battle of Buxar, where they defeated the Mughal Emperor the Nawab of Awadh and the Nawab of Bengal. So they defeated the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, the Nawab of Bengal and the Nawab of Awadh. So all these three were defeated, and then they signed some treaties with them, and so they acquired the revenue as well as civil justice rights, that is Diwani, and as well as civil justice rights for Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. And they had come to India in 1600 after a charter issued by Queen Elizabeth of the Queen of England. After that, the trading company since then consolidated. Earlier it was only a trading company, that is, it came to trade in India. But after this Battle of Buxar, the company since then consolidated its power in such a way so as to reach the nooks and corners of our country, and this company started its territorial expansion in the country. That is first time some territories came under the company's rule, the British East India's Company's rule, after the Battle of Buxar in 1765. So now let's move forward. So as you can see, this is the Fort William in Calcutta, which the British had established. This was one of the earlier forts which the British had built in Calcutta, and firstly it was fortified to protect their settlements, trading settlements, but after that it became an administrative office of the British East Indian Company. So first, this is we will know what is a constitution. So as this is constitution and we are studying the historical underpinnings, so we'll know what is constitution, and then after that we'll start with the historical underpinnings as well as the evolution. So what is a constitution? You can write your own definitions in the comment section, but I will tell you that it is the basic principles and laws of a nation, state or social group that determine the powers and duties of the government and guarantee certain rights to the people in it. So each and every country which is independent and sovereign has a constitution. It may be written or it may be unwritten. It may be flexible or it may be rigid. Every country which is sovereign and supreme, as well as has internally and externally independent, and also has its own constitution. In the first constitution to be which came into effect was the American Constitution, and after that various other countries adopted their own constitutions. So the basic principles and laws of a nation, state or social group is known as a constitution. That is, the constitution contains the basic principles, the philosophies, the essence and the laws of nation, state or social group that defines the powers and duties of the government. It also defines the powers and duties of the government, what the government needs to do for the people, what it aims to achieve, what are its objectives and goals, and also it guarantees certain rights to the people in it. That is, the people which come under the constitution are guaranteed certain fundamental rights under it, so that they are not exploited by the executive or the tyranny of the executive, and unlawful and constitutional laws are not enforced on them. So constitution guarantees certain rights to the people in it. So this is all about constitution. It is the basic principles and laws of a nation, state or social group that determine the powers and duties of the government. It is the basic principles and laws of the nation, state or social group. It can also be a social group, like in many parts of India also we know that there are tribal groups which follow their own customs and traditions, so beliefs, customs and traditions. So we can say that that they have their own constitution. In a way, they come under India's constitution, but they follow their own beliefs, customs and traditions, and so it determines the powers and duties of the government as well as and guarantees certain rights to the people of India or the country. So this is all about constitution. Now we'll start with the historical underpinnings. So after Battle of Buxar, the first the act that came the British East India Company enforced in India was the company after the company rule was from the company British East India Company ruled India from 1770 after 1765 to 1858. That is till revolt of 1857. After which the power was transferred to the British Crown. So the Regulating Act of 1773. What was the first act which was enforced by the company? Was the Regulating Act of 1773. So what was this? What were the features of this act? Was that it designated the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal, and it created an executive. So Governor of Bengal was given the title of Governor General of Bengal, and it created an executive council, not to be confused with the legislative council. It is earlier there was the legislative council only, but now it created an executive council also, in which there were 4 members to assist the Governor General of Bengal. So earlier there was only a legislative council for the Governor General, but now Governor General or the Governor of Bengal, but now there was an executive council also, which consisted of 4 members to assist him. And the first Governor General of Bengal was Lord Warren Hastings. So Lord Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of Bengal. This is a very important point for the prelims examination. Lord Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of Bengal. Now it made the governors of, as we know, there were 3 British presidencies in India: the Madras presidencies, the Bombay presidency, as well as the Calcutta, so or the Bengal presidency. So it made the governors of that is it was a centralizing trend. There was a centralizing trend in the Regulating Act of 1773. It had a centralizing tendency, and it centralized the powers it vested all the powers in Governor General of Bengal. It was trying to do it. So it made the governors of Madras and Mumbai presidencies Bombay presidencies subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal. So centralizing tendencies started from this act, because the governors of Madras as well as Bombay presidencies were made subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal after the Regulating Act of 1773. Now we will move forward. So now we will see that other features of the other features of the Regulating Act of 1773. So Supreme Court was established at Calcutta. It had one Chief Justice and 3 other judges. So Supreme Court was also established. It was the first Supreme Court in India in 1774 by the Regulating Act, and it had 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. That is, there were 4 members, 1 Chief Justice and 3 other judges. So it barred servants of the company from engaging in any private trade and accepting bribes. Earlier there was corruption in the British East India Company. The employees used to carry on private trade and accept bribes, and used to earn a lot from India, and then transfer huge amount of money to England after they retired. But this was the first act which barred servants of the company from engaging in private trade and accepting bribes. So it restricted the employees of the British East India Company, and Court of Directors of East India Company were required to report on revenue, civil and military affairs in India to the British Crown. So for the first time, the Court of Directors of the East India Company. The East India Company was a stakeholder company, and it was a private company, but it was controlled by the government, as we can see here. And for the first time, the Court of Directors were required to report on revenue, civil and military affairs in India. So this was all about the Regulating Act of 1773. And as you will see here, this Supreme Court of Calcutta, which was established in 1774, it was established in Fort William only. So this is what we see, that this Fort William was the Supreme Court of Calcutta. So it was the Fort William from where the administrative offices of the East India Company were located, and also this was the Supreme Court of Calcutta. Now after that came the Amending Act of 1781. This was the second act, the Amending Act of 1781. It was also known as the Declaratory Act of 1781. There is not much information about this act, and not much features are there in this act. It was primarily passed to rectify the defects associated with the Regulating Act of 1773. So this act, Amending Act of 1781, was primarily passed to rectify the defects associated with the Regulating Act. That whatever the defects were there in the Regulating Act, this act was passed to rectify the defects associated with the Regulating Act. So this was the act of Amending Act of 1781. Now came the Pitt's India Act of 1784. It distinguished between the political and commercial functions of the company. Double government created a new board of directors to manage the political affairs, while commercial affairs were managed by the Court of Directors of East India Company. So now came the Pitt's India Act of 1784. This was the third act which was passed by the British East India Company. Now Pitt's India Act of 1784 is important because it for the first time it distinguished between the political and commercial functions of the company. That is, the political functions were distinguished from the commercial functions of the company. Then double government. It created a new board of directors to manage the political affairs, while commercial affairs were managed by the Court of Directors of East India Company. That is, it created a new board of directors to manage the political affairs, while commercial affairs were managed by the Court of Directors of East India Company. Board of Directors was empowered to supervise and direct all operations of the civil and military government or revenues of the British possessions in India. So these were the features of Pitt's India Act. You have to remember these features if you have to give good answers in mains, as well as for identifying the correct options in the prelims examination. So Pitt's India Act of 1784 for the first time distinguished between political and commercial functions of the company. Then it established a system of double government. That is, it created a new board of directors to manage the political affairs, while commercial affairs were managed by the Court of Directors of East India Company. That is, commercial affairs were managed by the Court of Directors of East India Company. Commercial affairs was being managed by the Court of Directors of East India Company. But the political affairs was being managed by the new board of directors. That is, new board of directors was created, and it managed the political affairs of the East India Company. And commercial affairs was managed by the Court of Directors, which was earlier. You can say the board of directors or board of control. So board of control was empowered to supervise and direct all operations of civil and military government. It was empowered to supervise and direct all operations of the civil and military government or revenues of the British possessions in India. So all the civil and military government affairs, as well as the revenues of British possession, was controlled by the board of control or board of directors. And only the commercial affairs was controlled by the Court of Directors. After that came the Charter Act of 1833. This is the fourth act passed by the British East India Company. It made the Governor General of Bengal as Governor General of India. So Governor General of Bengal was made the Governor General of India. As we all know, first Governor General of Bengal was Lord Warren Hastings, and now Governor General of Bengal was made the Governor General of India in Charter Act of 1833, and all civil and military powers were vested in him. So all the civil and military powers was vested in the Governor General of India. So first such Governor General was Lord William Bentinck. So Lord William Bentinck, who was the Governor General of Bengal, became the Governor General of India after Charter Act of 1833 was passed. Now it deprived the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies to make laws also. That is, it deprived them of their legislative powers also. Earlier the Regulating Act of 1773 made governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal. But now it deprived the governors of Bombay and Madras presidencies to make legislations or pass laws. So this act was also had a centralizing tendency. Now all lawmaking powers were vested with the Governor General of India, that is Lord William Bentinck. So all lawmaking powers were now vested with the Governor General of India, and it deprived the Governor General of Bombay and Madras to make laws, make legislations. So it also ended the commercial activities of the East India Company. That is, the Court of Directors, which were there in the East India Company, were now not permitted to do commercial activities. So the British East India Company was only a political company. That is, the board of control which was established in the Pitt's India Act of 1784 Now Board of Control managed the political affairs political affairs, and also supervised the all operations of the civil and military government. Also supervised all operations of civil operations as well as military operations and government and revenues also. So this was done by the Board of Control. And Charter Act of 1833, the commercial activities of East India Company completely ended, and it became a purely political body. Now, the Charter Act of 1833 attempted to introduce a system of open competition for selection of civil servants. It only attempted to introduce a system of open competition, but due to the protest by the Britishers, it was not able to introduce it. So it only attempted to introduce a system of open competition for selection of civil servants, but it was not able to introduce it due to the British opposition. This was opposed by court because the court of directors opposed it. So this was opposed by court of directors, and this open system for the selection of civil servants was not introduced by the Charter Act of 1833. Now the laws made under these previous acts were called regulations. However, since the passage of this act, it came to be known as acts. So earlier the laws made under the acts were known as regulations, but after Charter Act of 1833, the acts which were passed came to be known as not as regulations but acts. So after that, an Indian Law Commission was appointed under the provisions of the Act. Lord Macaulay was the first chairman of this commission. An Indian Law Commission was appointed under the provision of the Act. Lord Macaulay was the first chairman of this commission. So a law commission was also appointed after Charter Act of 1833, and Lord Macaulay was the first chairman of this commission. So law commission was established, and Lord Macaulay was the chairman of this commission. After that, the act provided for the presidency of Bengal to be divided into the presidencies of Agra and Fort William. However, this never came into effect. So this never came into effect, and Bengal presidency remained the Bengal presidency. Then the British Parliament abolished slavery in Britain and all its possessions in 1833. So slavery was abolished by the Charter Act of 1833 in Britain as well as all other colonies of Britain. After that came the Charter Act of 1853. It provided for the separation of executive and legislative functions of the council. That is, earlier there was only the executive council of the Governor General, and as you can see here, I will show you in the slides. So in the first act, that is the Regulating Act of 1773, it created a new executive council, not to be confused with the legislative council of 4 members. And then in the Charter Act of 1853, it provided for the separation of executive and legislative functions of the council. So it provided for the addition of 6 new members for legislative council. So now the separation of executive and legislative functions of the council took place. That is, executive council will perform only executive functions, and legislative council will perform only legislative functions, and there will be separation of powers. And it provided for the addition of 6 new members for legislative council. That is the Indian Central Legislative Council. One second. It provided for the addition of 6 new members of the Legislative Council, that is the Indian Central Legislative Council. And civil services was now thrown open to Indians. So in 1853, now Indians could take part in the examination of civil services, and it was a very tough examination, as well as I will tell you the history that it was started in 1793 by Lord Cornwallis, but it was not thrown open to Indians till 1853. And after 1853 also, the age limit was very less for Indians. So most of the Indians were not able to qualify this examination, as it required a lot of expertise and was a very tough examination. So anyone who had not studied in London or Britain was not able to qualify this examination, as the age limit was also very low for Indians. Now local representation in Indian Central Legislative Council was given. That is, Bombay, Agra, Madras and Bengal presidencies were given local representation
in the Central Legislative Council. So this Legislative Council which was established, that is 6 new members were added in the Legislative Council. Addition of 6 new members was done. So local representation was given to Bombay, Agra, Madras and Bengal presidencies. So 4 presidencies were given local representation in that Legislative Council. Now the Court of Directors could create a new presidency or province. So the Court of Directors could create a new presidency or province. So the Court of Directors could create a new presidency or province. The Act provided for the appointment of a separate governor for the Bengal presidency. The Court of Directors could create a new presidency or province. The Act provided for the appointment of a separate governor for the Bengal presidency. That is, the Court of Directors could create a new presidency or province, and the Act provided for the appointment of a separate governor for the Bengal presidency. So this was all about Court of Directors to create a new presidency or province, and the Act provided for the appointment of a separate governor for the Bengal presidency. So this Act also provided for the appointment of separate governor for the Bengal presidency. That is, separate governor was appointed for the Bengal presidency. Now, this was after this the revolt of 1857 took place, and this was the state of India during the revolt of 1857. As you can see here, in the dark blue are the states in rebellion. So most of the states which are in dark blue are in rebellion. Then states loyal to the British with army in rebellion, that is in the light blue, which is less darker, like these states, like the states in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. All these states were states which were loyal to the British, but army was in rebellion in these states. Then after that, light blue states were states aiding the British, that is these states were aiding the British and were not in the rebellion. Then in brown, British areas affected by rebellion, that is brown areas where the areas of the British controlled territories were seriously affected by the rebellion. Then the green ones represent the neutral states, and the yellow ones represents the extent of British territory. So all the yellow territory is the extent of British territory, as you can see here, and all this you can see the graph, and you can identify the states which were in rebellion or which were not in rebellion but the army was in rebellion, or the states aiding British, and then British areas affected by the rebellion, and neutral states. This revolt was a very big revolt, and it almost shook the British Empire to the core. And also there were many changes in the army as well as the administrative and political system of British India after this revolt, because it was a very large revolt by the people, and the army also it failed because of lack of leadership, and the arms and ammunition used by the Indian princely states as well as other people were not up to the British standards. The discipline was not they were not able to match the discipline of the British army. They were not having the second group, they were having, and this was suppressed by the British army. Also there was lack of coordination and cooperation, and this was not a very well planned revolt, and also it did not spread to all the parts of India. So in some areas it was localized in nature. So these were all the reasons due to which the revolt of 1857 failed. And also British had a very good line of first line leaders as well as second line leaders, which helped in suppressing the revolt and defeating the people, as well as punishing and capturing and punishing the people who were involved in the revolt. So after that the rule of the British East India Company ended, and the power was transferred to the British Crown. So this was what the map of India looked like when the power was transferred to the British Crown. As you can see, all of Pakistan, Afghanistan, then Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan, everything, all the whole of South India lied in the, and also the Malay Peninsula and Singapore lied in the lied under British control. Now we will move on to the Crown Rule, which was from 1858 to 1947, which was as the power was transferred from British East India Company to the British Crown after the revolt of 1857. So Crown Rule, it was also known as Act for the Good Government of India, first act which was passed after that is the Government of India Act 1858. This is the Government of India Act 1858. It was known as the Act for the Good Government of India. It ended the dual government scheme initiated due to the Pitt's India Act, that is the Board of Control and Court of Directors, and the powers of the company's Court of Directors were transferred to the Secretary of State for India. So a new office, which was Secretary of State for India, was established, and the powers of the company's Court of Directors was transferred to the Secretary of State for India. It was an office which could be sued in England as well as India, and he was going to be the member of British Parliament, the Secretary of State for India. He was provided with an advisory body consisting of 15 members. So this Secretary of State for India was going to be a member of the British Parliament, and he was provided with an advisory body consisting of 15 members. So this was the Government of India Act 1858, and it ended the dual government scheme initiated due to Pitt's India Act of 1784. That is, the Court of Directors were there and Board of Control. So it ended this dual government scheme, and it transferred the powers of the Court of Directors to the Secretary of State for India. So Secretary of State in Council was set up as a body corporate. It was a corporate body and capable of suing and being sued in India and in England, as I told you earlier. A Viceroy would be appointed who would serve as the representative of the British Crown, and now the Viceroy of India was Lord Canning, was the first such Viceroy. So it was a Viceroy was established, a Viceroy was appointed who would serve as the representative of British Crown in India, and Lord Canning was the first such Viceroy of India. So in Government of India Act, made Lord Canning the first Viceroy of India. India became a direct British colony through the passage of this act. So now India was a direct British colony. Now after that, there were many Indian Councils Act which was passed. So this was made to give representative to mark the beginning of representative institution and give representation to the Indians by associating Indians with lawmaking. So Indian Councils Act of 1861. It made a beginning of representative institutions by associating Indians with lawmaking. Viceroy nominated some Indians as non-official members of his expanded council. Lord Canning nominated Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinkar Rao. So this was the Indian Councils Act of 1861. It gave representation to the Indians in lawmaking, as well as associated Indians with other representative institutions of the British Crown, and it made a beginning of representative institutions by associating Indians with lawmaking. Viceroy nominated some Indians as non-official members of the expanded council. That is, Viceroy could now nominate some non-official members to his expanded council. So Lord Canning nominated Raja of Banaras, the Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinkar Rao. Now it restored legislation making powers of Bombay and Madras presidency. So this was the first act which was decentralizing in tendency. So after this, decentralizing nature of the act could be identified from this restoration of legislative powers to Bombay and Madras presidencies. Now establishment of new legislative councils for Bengal, Northwest Frontier Province, and Punjab. So now there was establishment of new legislative council. There was a central legislative council, but the provincial legislative councils were to be set up in Bengal, Northwest Frontier Province, and Punjab. And Viceroy could make provisions for convenient transaction of business in the council. So Viceroy was given the provision for convenient transaction of business in the central legislative council. In case of the provincial councils like Bengal, Northwestern Frontier Province, and Punjab, there were governors. After this, it gave recognition to the portfolio system, which was established by Lord Canning. So Lord Canning established a new system known as portfolio system, in which Lord Canning offered his powers to the various ministers of the British Crown. Various ministers or the portfolios were held by various people, and some amount of powers could be transferred to the people, and they could take decision on the behalf of viceroy as well as the ministries. So this was what the portfolio system of Lord Canning was. Ordinances could now be issued by the viceroy, that is Lord Canning, without the concurrence of the council during an emergency. So if there was an emergency, ordinance could be issued by the viceroy, and the life of such an ordinance was 6 months. This is the High Court of Calcutta, which was established in 1860. So this is a very beautiful building built according to the Royal British architecture, and it just looked like the London architecture which was there in London, and it is a very historical building. It is still there. This is the High Court of Calcutta, established by the British in 1860, as you can see here. So now there was the Indian Councils Act. After that there came the Indian Councils Act of 1892. So it increased non-official members in the council. Members could now debate the budget without having the ability to vote on it, also barred from asking follow-up questions. So it increased the non-official members in the council, that is the Central Legislative Council. Non-official members were increased, and now members could now debate the budget without having the ability to vote on it, barred from asking follow-up questions. So members could now only discuss on that budget, but they were not able to vote on the budget, and also were barred from asking the follow-up questions, but they could only discuss. Now, nomination for non-official members to Central Legislative Council: Bengal Chamber of Commerce, Governor for Provincial Legislative Council based on recommendation of district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindars and chambers. Nomination for non-official members to Central Legislative Council, that is, nomination of non-official members were made to the Central Legislative Council. Bengal on the that is, nomination was done earlier also, that is, as we can see here in the 1861 Act, Councils Act. Lord Canning nominated Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patla and Sir Dinkan Rao to these were to his non-official expanded council. And now in Councils Act of 1892, it increased the non-official members in the council, and members could now debate the budget without having the ability to vote on it, also barred from asking follow-up questions. So members could now debate the budget without, so I told this earlier, and now nomination for non-official members were given to the Central Legislative Council on the recommendation of Bengal Chamber of Commerce, governors for Provincial Legislative Council based on the recommendation of district boards. It is nomination for non-official members to the Central Legislative Council on the recommendation of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and governors for Provincial Legislative Council based on recommendation of district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindar and Chamber of Commerce. So this was how the non-official members were nominated in the Central Legislative Council on the recommendation of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and governors of Provincial Legislative Council, and the non-official members of the Provincial Legislative Councils were nominated based on the recommendation of district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindars and Chamber of Commerce. So this was how nomination of members, non-official members, were done to the Central Legislative Council as well as the Provincial Legislative Councils. Now after that came the Modular reforms. It was named the Modular reforms because Lord Modular was the Secretary of State for India and Lord Minto was then the Viceroy of India. So the legislative councils at the center and the provinces increased in size. That is, there was an increase in the number of members in the legislative councils at the center as well as the provinces. It introduced non-official majority at the provincial legislature level. That is, it introduced non-official majority at the provincial legislature level. It enlarged the deliberative function of the legislative councils at both the levels. It introduced non-official majority at the provincial legislature level, and it enlarged the deliberative function of the legislative council at both the levels. So deliberation could now be done. It provided for the first time for Indians to be associated with the executive council. So for the first time, the Indians were associated with the Governor General's Viceroy's Executive Council for the first time. Earlier, they could only be the official member or non-official member of the Legislative Council, but now they could be the first time they were associated with the Executive Council of the Viceroy. That is, Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the law member in Viceroy's Executive Council. So he was the first member to be present in the
Viceroy's Executive Council, Satyendra Prasad Sinha from India. Now, a system of communal representation was introduced for Muslims, and this is why Lord Minto was known as the father of communal electorate or communal representation, because he introduced the system of communal representation for Muslims in India. Then separate representations were provided for presidency corporations, chamber of commerce, universities, and zamindars. That is, separate representations were provided for presidency corporations. In the legislative council, separate representation was provided for presidency corporations, chamber of commerce, universities, as well as zamindars. Then came the Government of India Act 1919. So it relaxed the control of center over the provinces by demarcating and separating the central and provincial subjects. So there was a decentralizing tendency in this act, as it relaxed the control of center over the provinces, and it demarcated and separated the central and provincial subjects. That is, central subjects were made separate and provincial subjects were made separate. Center would act laws on the central subjects, and provinces would make laws on and legislations on the provincial subjects. So diarchy. And then diarchy was introduced in the provinces. That is, provincial subjects were divided into transferred list and reserved lists. So provincial subjects were divided into transferred list and reserved lists, and this was known as the diarchy, which was introduced in provinces. And reserved lists were administered by the governor and his executive council that were not answerable to the legislature, whereas transferred lists were administered by the governor on the advice of the ministers responsible to the council. It is reserved lists were administered by both the lists were administered by the governor, but reserved list was administered by the governor and his executive council, which was not answerable to the legislature, whereas transferred list was administered by the governor on the advice of the ministers responsible to the council. That is, on the advice of the ministers which were taken from the legislative council. So it was responsible to the council. Ministers and the advice of the governor acted on the advice of the ministers, which was responsible to the legislative council. So this was this was how diarchy was introduced in provinces. After that, bicameralism and direct elections were introduced for the first time. That is, the Central Legislative Assembly or the Central Legislature of India was divided. Central Legislative Council was divided into two parts. That is, the upper house and the lower house. So this was what came to be known as bicameralism. The act mandated that the 3 of the 6 members of the Viceroy's Executive Council were to be Indian. So 3 of the 6 members were to be Indians. Earlier there was only 1 member in the Viceroy's Executive Council, but now 3 out of the 6 members should be Indians. Principle of separate electorates were extended to six Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans. So again, principle of separate electorates was again extended, and this was because of the divide, and because Britishers were pursuing the divide and rule policy in India, which was benefiting them, and they were dividing the various communities and religions present in India so that they could rule for longer. But so the principle of separate electorates was again extended, and to 6 Indian. Earlier it was given to Muslims. Now it was extended to 6 Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans also. Now provincial budgets was separated for the first time from central budget. So provincial subjects were also separated from the central subjects, and provincial budget was also separated from the central budget, and provinces could now form their own budget. Now a Central Public Service Commission was established, and it granted franchisee to a limited number of people on the basis of property, tax, or education. So a limited franchisee was to vote in the elections. A limited franchisee was given to people who were on the basis of taking franchisee or providing franchisee was the people should be good, well educated, or they should own a large number of property, or give some amount of tax. So this was the criteria for limited franchisee, which was granted by the British government to the Indians. Now came the Government of India Act of 1935, which forms the basis of our Constitution of India. Many of the sections of our Constitution have been taken from the Government of India Act of 1935. So let's move on to this act. So Government of India Act provided for the establishment of an All India Federation consisting of provinces and the princely states as units. So the Government of India Act of 1935 wanted to establish an All India Federation, that is a federation of all India was to be established, which consisted of British provinces as well as the princely states. Now, at that time, there were almost 565 princely states in India. So, it divided the powers between the center and units in terms of three lists: federal list, provincial list, and the concurrent list. Residuary powers were given to the viceroy. However, this federation never fructified since princely states did not join it. So, it divided the powers between the center and units in terms of three lists, that is federal list, provincial list, and the concurrent list. So the powers were divided into three lists, that is federal list will make laws, federal government will make laws on the subjects in the federal list, the provincial government will make laws on the subjects in the provincial list, and the concurrent list was there on which both the federal government as well as the provincial government could make laws, and the residuary powers were vested in the viceroy. However, this federation never fructified since princely states did not join it. So princely states did not join it, so Government of India Act never came into force, and this federation was never came into existence, this federation. Now it abolished hierarchy in the provinces and introduced provincial autonomy in its place. That is, provinces were given autonomous status in after Government of India Act 1935, and earlier there was a hierarchy system which was earlier established after the Government of India Act of that is Montagu-Chelmsford reform of 1919. As you can see here, hierarchy was established in the Montagu-Chelmsford reform. This Government of India Act of 1919 was also known as Montagu-Chelmsford reform, because Montagu was the Secretary of State for India at that time, and Lord Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. And then after that, in Government of India Act 1935, the hierarchy was Government of India Act of 1935. The hierarchy was then abolished from the provinces, and provincial autonomy was introduced in its place. Then after that, the act introduced responsible government in provinces. That is, the governor was required to act with the advice of ministers responsible to the provincial legislature. So the act introduced responsible government in provinces, in all the provinces the responsible government was introduced, and that is, the governor was required to act with the advice of ministers responsible to the provincial legislature. So this Government of India Act 1935 introduced responsible government in provinces, and the governor was required to act with the advice of ministers and responsible to the provincial legislature. So responsible government was established in the provinces, hierarchy was abolished, provincial autonomy was given to the provinces, and now the governor had to act on the advice of the council of ministers and was to be accountable to the legislature, responsible to the legislature. It provided for the adoption of hierarchy at the center. That is, hierarchy was established at the central government, and this provision did not come into effect at all. It only gave the Government of India Act, many of the provisions did not come into effect. Firstly, the princely states did not join the federation, and then this provision which adopted hierarchy at the center never came into effect. Bicameralism was introduced in 6 provinces. Bicameralism was introduced in central legislature earlier, and now bicameralism was introduced in 6 provincial legislatures also, that is Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and United Provinces. So these were the provinces which had bicameralism, that is the upper house and lower house for legislating laws, that is Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and United Provinces. Now separate electorates was further extended to depressed classes, women, and labor. So separate electorates was further extended by the Government of India Act 1935. The depressed classes, it was extended to depressed classes, but Gandhiji came on to fast in the Yarwada jail in Pune, and then there was a resolution signed between B.R. Ambedkar and Gandhi that depressed classes will not get separate electorates, but they will get reservation in the Legislative Council. So this was what happened when separate electorates were given to the depressed classes, women, and labor. After that, that provided for the setting up of Federal Service Commission, Provincial Public Service Commission, and Joint Public Service Commission, Federal Court, and Reserve Bank of India. So all these were set up by the Government of India Act of 1935. It is Federal Public Service Commission, Provincial Public Service Commission, Joint Public Service Commission, and Federal Court, as well as Reserve Bank of India. So as you can see here, these are the states in 1937. After the elections in 1937, the provincial elections took place. Indian National Congress secured all these the majority in all these states, as you can see here: Assam, Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, United Provinces, Central Provinces, then Bombay, Madras. All these were governed by the Indian National Congress. Then Unionist Party in Punjab, United Party in Sindh, and no elections held in some of the parts, and princely states were there. So there the rule was by the king of the princely state, and they were also under the British authority. They were princely states, but they were not autonomous. They abided by the British crown, and they accepted British crown as their they accepted the hegemony of the British crown, and they accepted that they were under the British crown. So the princely states were independent in their sense, but not independent in the sense that they were under the hegemony of the British crown. So this was the result of the elections in 1937. After that came the Indian Independence Act of 1947. So in the Indian Independence Act of 1947, what happened was that it declared India as an independent and sovereign state. It provided for partition of India and creation of two new dominions, India and Pakistan. It abolished the position of Secretary of State for India. It abolished the office of Viceroy and provided for each dominion a Governor General who was to be appointed by British King on the advice of the Dominion Cabinet. So two dominions were made, India and Pakistan. Secretary of State, position of Secretary of State was abolished. It declared India as an independent and sovereign state. It abolished the office of Viceroy and provided for each dominion a Governor General who was to be appointed by the British King on the advice of the Dominion Cabinet. So in both the dominions the cabinets were formed, and on the advice of the Dominion Cabinet, two Governor Generals were to be appointed for each dominion. One Governor General was to be appointed for each dominion. It empowered the constituent assemblies of the two dominions to frame and adopt any constitution for their respective nations, and to repeal any act of the British Parliament, including the Independence Act itself. The constituent assemblies were empowered to legislate for their respective dominions till the new constitution were drafted and enforced. So they were required to legislate also. So they were not only the constituent assemblies, but they were also the legislative councils or legislative assemblies of the country till the new constitution was drafted and enforced. So these constituent assemblies could act laws also. It granted the princely states the freedom to join either of the dominions or to remain independent. So this was the condition of India after Independence India Act 1947. Indian Independence of India Act 1947. So this was the partition took place. Two dominions were formed, East Pakistan as well as West Pakistan. Then these were the large princely states were not acceding to either country upon independence were Hyderabad, Junagadh and Kashmir. These were the large states which were not acceding to either country, but in the end Hyderabad, Junagadh and Kashmir joined India. And then you can see the partition provinces, that is Punjab was the partition provinces and the Bengal was the partition province. After that, the Radcliffe line, which is the dividing line made by Sir Cyril Radcliffe, Lord Cyril Radcliffe, which was the dividing line between the border between India and Pakistan. The Muslim majority provinces were kept on the Pakistan side, and the Hindu majority provinces were kept on the districts were kept on the Indian side. Then movement of the Hindu and Sikh refugees, you can see from West Pakistan and from the Sindh. You can see the movement of Hindu refugees to Rajasthan as well as Gujarat, and in Punjab also you can see the movement of Hindu refugees and Sikh refugees, and then you can see the movement of Muslim refugees to West Pakistan also, and to the East Pakistan also from Bengal and Assam. and you can see the movement of Hindu refugees from Bengal to West Bengal as well as to the northeastern states. So now, and the East Pakistan got liberated in 1971 after India-Pakistan war, and so this is what India looked like after the Independence of India Act in 1947. After that, after the Constituent Assembly, an interim government was formed. Then the general elections took place, and then the first government of India came into effect, and the Jawaharlal Nehru became the first prime minister, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad became the first president of India. So this was all about this video. Hope you found this video informational, and you can see all the slides. All the important points are given on all these slides, and so these are all the important points. You will not need anything else other than this for clearing the exam. You can just take a screenshot of these slides, or you can just go through these slides again and revise it. So these were the historical underpinnings and the evolution of Constitution of India. Hope you found this video informational. Please like, share and subscribe the channel. We will see you in the next video.